Hi everyone, welcome back to Behind the Scenes Day. So we're here with Dr. Hurst today. She'll be leading us through a buying workshop, so she can go ahead and get us started.
All right, hello everyone. Glad you're able to hop in and watch our session here. I see a couple others hopping in, so we'll give them a second. Share my screen here. All right, is everybody able to see? Let's see, get my. All right, you guys can see the PowerPoint okay? Okay, awesome. All right, well, we're going to start our behind the scenes buying exercise, and we are going to focus on the company American Apparel, since majority of college students have heard of American Apparel, or maybe you have an American Apparel t-shirt or shorts or something like that. It seems to be a pretty widely popular with college students, so we chose American Apparel. I am Jessica Hurst, and I am a merchandising faculty here at Iowa State, and I am happy to be here with you today. Today, we're going to focus on a buying plan, but first we need to talk about an assortment plan and a model stock plan, as that feeds into our buying plan and our preparation for market, which is going to be the activity that we'll do at the end of our session today. So by definition, an assortment plan is a way to match the variety of inventory with customers' needs. And an assortment plan will result in establishing what's called a model stock plan, which is helping us to decide what the desired assortment is regarding inventory. And it's broken down by a selection of factors that are important to your target market. So model stock factors include things like your brand, the style, price, material or fabrication, color, size, and variety of sizes. So one size versus small, medium, large, small, medium, extra large, etc., or even numbered sizes. So when we're talking about planning our assortment, we need to make sure that we plan our assortment before you go to market. And you may need to make adjustments based on what you see at market once you return from market. So when you go to market, you're going to plan by class, vendor. You're going to consider your floor presentation, your average price point for your target market. And you also want to keep in mind products called icing when you select your products. So if you think of if you're a department store and you have a floor pad, you want to have icing items, which would be those fashion color items or those really trendy items that would get customers to come onto your floor pad. Or if you're a store on Main Street and you have these types of icing items in your window display, which would get customers to come into your store. So you want to keep in mind to balance your assortment with icing items as well. And then you want to plan your assortment in a way that helps you stay in budget, which is really the most important part, is that you have to stay within your budget. So you also need to consider your buying philosophy. So do you have a first in, first out philosophy, which would be you want to be the first one into that market of that particular product, and then you're the first one to mark it down and out of it, and then on to the next trend? Or do you have a different type of merchandising philosophy, which would include things like depth and width? So are you a Target or a Walmart where you have a wide variety and a lot of assortment within each of those? So depth would be how many variations of a particular product you have, and width is how many different types of products the store carries. You also want to consider your price point. So you want to have a variety of different price points that all fit your target customer. And then you also want to identify the trends that your customer is looking for. You want to balance your assortment with basic fashion and those staple needs for your customer, and then also consider customer service items and maintain a balanced classification. So you want to make sure that you have mix and match items. So you have a similar amount of tops versus bottoms, so your customers can buy a full outfit when they're shopping in your department. Another thing to keep in mind when you're planning your assortment is that as you're viewing different vendors, it's good to take notes at different vendors and see what vendors have to offer. And most everyone has a smartphone, so you can take pictures at your vendor appointments, and you want to make sure that you edit duplication. So in this image on the right-hand side, you can see that a lot of these images or a lot of these sweaters are very similar in style. And then also the colors are pretty bland and kind of bleed together. So you really want to make sure that you have shopped the trends, you pick the trends that your customers are looking for, and you don't need 4 of the same sweaters from 4 different vendors. So you want to make sure that you incorporate those novelty pieces, but yet you want to make sure that you also have a good variety and an assortment for your customers that will give you a good visual floor representation on, as you're thinking of market, you're also considering where it would be placed within the store, what it would be partnered with, what it could look like, because you, as the buyer and the buying team, can give that information to the selling floor to help them visual merchandise your products. So we need to get ready to go to market now that we kind of have a basic understanding of what we're looking at here. So we are going to switch over to our handouts. So you have a PDF handout of a lot of American Apparel styles. Here's some of them, not all of them, that are listed in your PDF file. And then you also have a vendor, market vendor worksheet, which is what we're going to be working from. So we'll go ahead and we'll switch over to our worksheet here. So I'll just give you some guidelines. And so these are some things that we're going to do to help us prepare to go to market. And we've gone to market. We've seen what the vendor has to offer, which is in our PDF document here of all of our images. And so these are the styles that we get to select from. So from our worksheet, now we're working with an open to buy of $35,000. And a lot of times you'll have requirements of what your purchasing of styles and units needs to be. So for example, we're going to give you a guideline here that an all store buy requires a minimum of 500 units, and you are required to buy at least 2 all store styles. So if one all store style is 500 units, which we have discussed here, then we have to buy 2 of those, 2 different all store styles, which each would take 500 units minimum. Then our top store buy requires a minimum of 300 units. So top stores would be our higher volume stores that would be in major cities. So with these top stores, we can be on the trendier side, more fashion forward. All of our store buy, we might want to be a little more conservative. And a top store buy is 300 units in requirement, and we have to buy 2 top store styles. So in this next box down here, I just gave you a quick scenario of what you could pay, what the pricing would be. And this is the cost price that we're going to pay the vendor. And so all dresses are $18 each. All short sleeve tops are $13 each. All tank tops are $11 each. All long sleeve tops are $15 each. And all bottoms, which short skirts, are $13 each. And that's our cost price. Now, one of the things that we're just going to do to make it a little easier for us is I gave you kind of these blanket cost prices for all the dresses. Obviously, not all dresses are created equal, not all shirts, but just to make this just to make our calculations go a little easier and to go a little faster, we'll just use this as our price category here of all these items. And then also the other thing we need to think about is that when we have different color waves, which some of these items will come in different color waves, then that could also introduce a different price point. So red or navy, for example, if we're looking at this dress here, could also include a different price point. But just to make it a little easier for us, for our calculations, we're not going to worry about different pricing for color waves, but just know that if you're in the industry and you're on the job, that would be also a factor that you would be considering different price points based on color. And oftentimes, and for American Apparel, for example, they have a cost price for black and white, a different cost price structure for black and white, and then anything that's a color is yet another price. And so again, those color waves come into play, but for us and for our purposes for this calculation, for these calculations, we're not going to worry about that. So here's our pricing structure. We have 35,000 in our open to buy. So we need to make sure that we don't go over budget. And so this is where the fun part comes into play, where you get to look through, keeping in mind this pricing structure here and looking in your PDF document. So I did this first one as an example. So this is something that all companies, a lot of retail companies will do once they get back from market. They're going to do this in Microsoft Excel, because then what they're going to do is they're going to create this as a table. We're going to just stay in Microsoft Word to make it a little easier for us, but know that you could convert this into an Excel file. And actually an Excel file would be a lot easier to work with once you're on the job, because then we can categorize and sort and look through our different styles, etc. So for us, we're just going to stay in Microsoft Word. So we only have 2 different documents to go back and forth from: this PDF document of our American Apparel items and our worksheet here. So I did one for you. I just went in and snagged a copy of this racerback tank, put in the style number, and this is going to be considered my all store style number 1. And I just put in what color, why, thinking about why the customer would like it. So I said, it has classic lines, it's a simple silhouette. So always thinking through why your customer would like these certain products, whether it's the style or the color, or it's a layering piece, for example, could be another reason why my customer would like it. The price is $11. So again, I came up here, all tank tops are $11. And I'm going to buy 500 units. I have to buy at least 500 units for an all store style. So remember, you have to buy 2 all store styles, which require 500 units. And I have to buy a minimum of 2 top store styles, which require 300 units. And then after that, you can use and buy. So I could buy more, but I'm just going to start with 500 and then see how much money I have left. So I took my $11 cost price times my 500 units. And so far I've spent 5,500. All right, do we have a question? Yes, you're right, Chris. It does not take long to spend $35,000. So you may think, okay, wow, 35,000, that's an awful lot. This is with one vendor, American Apparel. And when we would go to market, right, we'd see lots of vendors. And so this 35,000 is going to go pretty quickly. So what I'd like to do, we'll do another example here. I'll show you. So I'm just going to go down here in my table, and then you can keep bumping down. So what I did is I came into this PDF file, and let's scroll down and find the style that I want to put in. Okay, so if I go to the edit tab and I say take a snapshot, and I'll just take a snapshot of this short sleeve V-neck here. And then I come into my Word document and click where I want, and then I can do Control V and I can paste that in. And I can make that smaller. And then you can type in all the information, whatever information you want. So it's style 6456. Oops, 6456. So whatever information you want to put in there is completely up to you. It's going to be dependent on, kind of on how much time we have. Obviously, if you're working for a company, you have a specific format to use. You'll know all the information. And so the colors, if I go back into my PDF, here are all the colors that it comes in. So I could pick any of these colors. So we'll just stay with navy. Again, why the customers would like it. My price point. So if I come back up here, so all short sleeve tops are $13 each. And I'm going to do this for a top door, which I said I had to buy at least 300 units. So my $13 times 300. So you want to get your calculator out or your phone. That's 3,900 plus my 5,500. So I've already spent $9,400 with just those two styles. So again, your money will go quickly. So I'll give you some time. I know this is a little unique because we're not sitting in the room together and I can't walk around and give you some ideas or advice, but I think you guys get the idea of what we're looking at here. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to give you some time to work with the worksheet and the PDF and kind of scroll through there. And just remember the guidelines that you have. So you have to buy at least 2 all store, which require at least 500 units. And you have to buy at least 2 top store, which require 300 units. So make sure that you follow those guidelines on the worksheet. And then the pricing structure is within that box that I listed for you. So you'll be able to match up your product with the price point and then calculate that through. So I just started with a minimum of 500 units for my all store and my top store. And maybe if I have more money, I could go back and buy more, but I'm going to start with the minimum amount first. So I'll just give you a little bit of time to go through and calculate, and then please feel free to unmute your mic and ask any questions you might have. And one thing I actually, as I'm thinking while you guys are looking through this, I'll just mention that a lot of companies use companies that help them do fashion forecasting. So they, Doniger is a company out of New York, for example. So as a buyer, you would, when you go to market in New York, you would likely set up an appointment with your fashion forecasting company. And that may be one of your first appointments that you go, and then they're going to tell you what those fashion colors are for this upcoming season, what the silhouettes and the styles are. And so you would also have that information going into market. So if you're looking at that long list of colors and not sure, wow, I have no idea what color I should pick, you would have some insight as to what your fashion forecasting company told you. And not all companies have a fashion forecasting company that they hire to give them that information. Sometimes you as the buyer, you work with your assortment planning team and they're doing the research and they're giving you some of those tips and some of that information before you go to market. So when you go to market, you plan ahead, you know what your budget is, and you also want to get a good idea of how many styles you can look at when you go to market so you don't overspend, because it's really easy to go over budget when you go into a showroom and the vendor has so many beautiful items and you just want to buy it all. And so you really have to stay to your budget, and then also making sure that you don't have to share that budget information with your vendor. Because if they know how much money you have to spend, they'll want you to spend it all with them. And you have maybe 8 other vendor appointments to go to. So it's also really important to keep that information proprietary and keep that information to yourself. So that way it's, kind of a neutral meeting. And obviously they're trying to sell you their products, but they don't necessarily know how much you can afford or how many you can buy while you're there. So hopefully this next part, while you're actually doing your own calculations, will be kind of fun. It'll give you some math practice. It'll let you look at some styles of garments. And also as you're putting these together, make sure that you're thinking about the balance that I mentioned. So if you have a couple tops, you might want to balance out your assortment with a skirt or a shirt or something like that. Or if you have a dress, so have a nice balance. We don't want to have all tops or all bottoms, right? So we want to have kind of this balance of, hey, that tank top or that V-neck shirt I just picked would look really good with that mini skirt. Either one of those you could wear with that mini skirt. And so kind of try to have a balance of tops and bottoms as well. So I'll let you work and let me know what questions you might have.
Where are the handouts? I can't find them.
These, these handouts were emailed out to you by Chris Wise. If you are not able to find them, we can try and find a way to put them into the chat box. Is that a possibility?
Can we?
Can you put like files, or if she just wants to put her email?
If you put your email address in the chat box, we can email it to you again. Otherwise, if you look in your email, Chris Wise should have emailed to you all the handouts.
Okay, I'll look right now. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Friday morning, Friday at 5:40 p.m. I sent you an email.
Thank you. I found them.
Okay, great.
So Chris, your question, how does a young buyer get over looking at such large numbers and large dollar amount? Are you talking like the open to buy values?
I mean, as a young buyer, there's such large numbers.
Yeah.
Well, you look at that number and the amount of money you're spending and you go, what if I make a mistake?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll tell you that it's everybody makes mistakes. And if you can catch your own mistakes before it becomes a huge problem. So I always, especially dealing with such large dollar amounts and someone else's money. So when I was at Neiman's, my buying office was a $25 million buying office. And I was really nervous about, plugging in the wrong dollar amount or, when I was keying in the purchase orders, being careful to make sure that I plugged in the right quantity, right? Because if you buy, you add an extra zero and you're buying, 1,000 instead of 100, I mean, that's a huge problem. That's a huge mistake. So if you can catch those, but I think the more you work with the numbers, and I mean, it just comes with experience. Having a $25 million buying office, like I had never worked with that much volume before, just on my own buying on the buying side. So I think just the more practice you get, but overcoming those large numbers, it's just going back and double checking your math and always checking and triple checking yourself. And so in my retail math class, I share with the students, different checkpoints on a couple different ways to calculate a formula. And I always did it both ways to make sure that I got the same answer. And so that helped me to put it into perspective and minimize the number of errors that I might have when you're dealing with such large dollar amounts and units, even when you're dealing with thousands of units.
Thank you.
Welcome. Let's see, what kind of experience did you have as a buyer before becoming a professor? So my retail experience started at the store level when I was 14, worked lots of different retail places, all the way from high school into college. Worked for companies like Dillard's and Yonkers and The Buckle and independent retailers, so small mom and pop shops. I've worked for pizza places. So any retail experience that you can get, whether it's in a restaurant, because they know working as a server as a restaurant, anyone in retail knows that that's a very challenging job. And so even when I interviewed with the recruiter at Neiman's and shared with her the different types of retail experience that I'd had, she said, even if you'd only ever worked at a restaurant, we know that that's customer service right there. So for those of you that have only worked restaurants or grocery stores or things like that, it does still matter. But then, so after my undergrad, my first job out of college was assistant buyer at Neiman Marcus. And I worked there for a little over a year and then came back to Iowa State and for my master's. And then throughout my master's, I worked at Target. I did internship with Target and then stayed on as their recruiting coordinator for Iowa State and kind of worked on the corporate side of Target until I finished my master's. And then just did different industry visits to keep up with what's going on in buying, because obviously a lot changes from year to year, and also everything that's happened with COVID this last year. I've really reached out to our advisory council members here at Iowa State and any HR contacts that I have, just to reach out and kind of get the pulse on what's happening in their company, so that way I can better prepare my students, because I always am looking for recruiters to help share with me what can I do to help better prepare my students? What are those skill sets that they're needing? And this past year, all of the recruiters have said they need to be flexible. If COVID has taught students anything, it's how to be flexible. And so I always share with my students in classes, while you're in the midst of COVID right now, think of all the things that you've had to do differently. You've had to learn differently with your classes. You've had to be more self-motivated, right? Like you have really had to be really self-motivated. And so sit back and think of all of these skill sets that you've been forced to come across because of COVID, and use that in an interview, because those are the types of things that retailers are looking for. Those are the skill sets. You've had to learn how to communicate differently. All of your group projects, you can't meet in person. Now we're starting to be able to maybe meet in person if we're sitting 6 feet away, but so everyone's meeting on Zoom. And so you guys are experts on Zoom meetings and all that type of technology and Google Docs and presentations. You guys have learned all kinds of new software to help you communicate and to help facilitate your education. So while it's fresh in your mind, I definitely would encourage you to write that all down now, because those are the skill sets that retailers are looking for as they continue to evolve. And there's going to be a ripple effect of COVID. There's going to be a lot of things that retailers had to do because of COVID, like curbside pickup and different ways of communicating with their customers, and virtual internships, for example, that retailers might keep going forward for the next 5 years or 10 years. And so once COVID's a little more under control, a lot of these things are just not going to go away. Like retailers are still going to have to think creatively and be innovative. And so those types of skill sets will definitely be helpful. So I know that was kind of a detour of an answer, but I wanted to take that opportunity to share with you on how you can really use what you guys have experienced and what you guys are going through to your benefit, because you are definitely very marketable in the industry once you get out there. And then another buying experience I had was I worked for an independent retailer, Kay's Beach Boutique up at Lake Okoboji. I worked for her for a summer when I was in high school. And so then when I did my undergrad in college, I was able to do my internship with her. And prior to my internship, I was able to go to market with her in Chicago and kind of help her experience what a buy is like for just an independent retailer. And from that, I learned a lot of the dating terms that we talk about in the retail math class, like the extra dating and things like that. And so I learned and watched her negotiate for those types of terms, because she's only open from like Memorial Day till Labor Day, and then she's closed for the rest of the year. And so when she's ordering her merchandise in October, November, she needs it drop shipped in May, but she can't pay for it till like maybe June 1st. And so it was really great experience to sit and walk through market with her. And then help when the merchandise came, it was kind of fun because it's like, hey, I was in Chicago and I bought this merchandise with you, and here it is in our store, and I'm helping you visually merchandise it. And so that was a really great experience, walking through the whole market for an independent retailer, which is completely different than a Neiman Marcus or a Target or something like that.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Hurst, for coming on today. We really, really appreciate it. It was super fun. For all the students, our next session is going to be at 3 o'clock. It's going to be the student designer panel. So if no one else has any questions, thank you, Dr. Hurst.
Yes. And do you want me to put my email in the chat window? So in case any of the students have questions, please feel free to reach out to me.
Bill, what'd you buy?
Yeah, I'd like to know. Please feel free to send me your sheets. So I'd like to know what you ended up buying. I can't type and talk today. So hurstj@iastate.edu. So please feel free to email me if you want to share your buying vendor sheet with me. I'd love to see what you ended up buying, and if you spent all your money.
Yeah. Lauren and Janae went right to 34,000. So.
All right. You gotta, and you gotta keep track of that, right? Like you can't be under your open to buy budget every time. Otherwise, upper management will say, oh, I guess you don't need that. We'll give it to someone else. Mm-hmm. So you really want to make sure that you use your dollars wisely, but you also want to have some open to buy left over for those fashion pieces, right? And those reorders that come through throughout the course of this season. So it's really tricky. And the more you are on the job and the more practice you have with your department, the smoother you'll become, the smoother you'll be at it. So, well, thank you guys. This was a fun session. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.